Hey everybody, it's Doug Green and I'm the publisher of Technology Reseller News, and I'm very pleased to have with me Jon Arnold. Jon, thank you for joining me today.
Hey, you're welcome, Doug. But good to be back and happy to be recapping what we just saw today.
So behind Jon's head, in that sort of darkened room back there, we were locked in that room almost all day with about 30 or 40 other people from around the world, actually, mainly around the country. It's a vCon conference, Jeff Pulver's vCon conference, Fall 25 vCon. It also continues tomorrow with the vCon Foundation meeting. Jon, maybe we should fill everyone in, though. We were talking about vCon. What is vCon?
Yes, so it's yet another acronym in a very crowded world, especially for AI stuff, but Telecom has always had these. So vCon is, by the way, if you want to get it, be right on message, it's lowercase vCon, but the C is uppercase. So it's vCon, and it stands for virtual conversations. So sometimes when you see that word con, and you think it's calm because we're in the communication space, it's not. It's specific to conversations. And a big part of that story is when we think of conversations, it's usually human, person to person, which is fine, and which is how most communication happens. But the idea of virtual, there's two pieces to that, but the important one is that increasingly with AI, and yes, yet another acronym of Agentic AI and CAI, which is conversational AI, the advancements in bot technology as we know it has become good enough that it can conduct very human-like, conversations with people, with humans. So bot to human or human to bot, and all of a sudden you have these long conversations, whereas before chatbots were very simple, they call it deterministic, right? It was not conversational. So now this level of interaction is really growing. So there's a lot of conversational data, but that is generally not being tapped, or we don't know what to do with. The vCon concept is kind of like a containerization concept where all of the associated information, so it's like the data and the metadata that from a conversation is encapsulated in I would just call it a container, I guess. But the idea is that it is all in one place, and it's a very secure place that basically ensures some privacy and control over the content. And this means that you can capture inputs from all kinds of sources, not just, as I said, that speech to speech, speech-based person to person, because it's also text-based. I'm not sure yet, Doug, if vCons is able to do video, but text and voice is plenty to start with, right? Because that is the vast majority of how we communicate. So this part of this is resetting the concept of what a conversation is, right? It's now these person to person, person to machine, machine to machine, all of these variables that all lead to this is what goes on inside an organization. This is what goes on in interactions between brands and customers. So there's a rich kind of palette of data here to draw from that we haven't normally captured. And yes, it's structured and it's unstructured. And this gets us close to the world of where I live most of my time, in the worlds of UC and customer service.
Why is vCon such a big step forward? There was much made of this today. It's not just sort of some more AI.
Yeah, I think the big idea here is that vCon itself, it's not a product, it's not a solution. It's really all the work that's gone on, primarily led by Thomas McCarthy Howe, but there's others too, of course, but it's to create a standard. So much like the way SIP emerged as a standard back in the early days of VoIP, which really helped give it some credibility because now you could build an ecosystem around it, right? Where it's interoperable, it's open, but it's also standards based. So that means that, vendor A can talk to vendor B using the same technology and it would be seamless. So now the vCons world, we're trying to get to that. So I'm not in that world, but I know they're trying to make this an IETF standard. And when that is in place, you've got kind of the foundation now to turn this into an industry where it can just gain widespread adoption to show the value. But of course, as we're all here for, it can be monetized. We're not there yet, but these are the pieces you need to have in place.
Now, let's explain to everybody why this is very interesting with Jeff, because there's Jeff Pulver, there's the Pulver order, there's the history of UCAS and now vCon, and the sort of very different way he goes. All the other technology events, maybe there's an attorney hanging out somewhere that talks about something. There was a lot of law here today.
I like that term, a lot of law.
Yeah.
And that's, you could probably do a TV series about this, but
We'll call it a lot of law.
Yeah. So us and who go to a lot of, we analysts who go to a lot of technology events, right, there's the odd lawyer there. Doesn't mean they're not important, but we are in Washington, D.C. We are talking about federal policies and regulations. So, of course, this is probably the reason to have this event here, because of the access to the lawyer community. And what they bring is a knowledge of technology that you don't get at technology conferences normally, because they're looking at this not from a technology point of view, but for the world of law, where their business is, we're going to go in this direction about compliance and consent as being fundamental drivers of what's behind this world of vCon, because without compliance and consent, this technology becomes totally Wild West, and chances are the bad guys are going to win out over the good guys. So this is why we need law involved, because you have to have frameworks of policy and regulations that provide a little governance here for everybody. Because when you think about the ecosystem and how many players, buyers, sellers, users, creators, etc., it's complicated. And without a clear set of rules that everybody, just like vCon being a standard that all the vendors can work with, you're not going to get it anywhere. It's just not going to work.
There was a lot of discussion here about consent. We were sort of joking about it, but the serious part is, since vCon radically changes the way that the number of ways a conversation can be recorded and used, it occurs to everyone that there might be a lot of situations where you probably think you're not being recorded, that in the future will be recorded maybe like for all time.
Oh, for sure. For starters, once it's recorded, right, it unless the cloud kind of blows up, it's gonna, as you say, it's for all time. So there's no nothing that just disappears.
Right.
And that's the difference between us and machines, because when we forget stuff, it's gone for all time unless we can somehow retrieve it out of our brains. But that's not easy to do. So you've got this world where there's so much data now, and there are so many forms of conversations. All of us have way too many. We have a million channels to communicate. No one can keep track of all of this stuff. So there's when you think about the amount of potential institutional knowledge that any one person has about anything from all their conversations, it's just kind of like absorbed into your brain, but you couldn't pull out the details of old conversations very easily. That's where vCons is really trying to get to say, not only is this stuff captured and recorded in a safe place, but it's accessible. And there is a universe of vendors in the compliance space, communications compliance, that we don't normally see in the UCOMs, in the UCAS world, but they're very important to this as data becomes a bigger and bigger story, right? We have so much communications now. We're overwhelmed with it all. And vCons is one of the tools that can help make it more manageable, accessible, practical for everybody. And it's such a big thing to get your head around. It's easy to forget that, you do have to have a framework in place to make it work.
Do you see monetization soon? We heard a little bit about it. So there may be maybe 30 companies here today, 30 leaders.
Well, certainly looking at the sponsors on the screen there, yeah.
And there are a lot of household names in the telecom industry, at least household names. But when we were in our sessions, there were maybe one or two people that seemed to be literally monetizing or very close to monetizing. There were a lot of surprises people that were having in terms of discovery of new things that they might be able to do. it feels very, I feels like I've seen this before. It feels like the beginning of UCAS, where initially some people were out there selling cloud services, hosted services it was called, but it took off soon after that.
So I would call this like the second big theme that we heard repeatedly. That is this, that we are trying to put the pieces in place for kind of like a new world or new era of communications, which isn't that different from the new world that VoIP was opening up when Jeff first kind of
Right.
became, a big thing in this world of communications. And that's the idea that with AI kind of running faster than we can catch it, we don't know yet what's going to work. I think I came up once about a killer app. So the thing is that we heard over and over was we don't know yet what the real great use cases are going to be. And that's okay. We just know, because as you say, we've seen this movie before. When these innovations come to market, it's not that we'll just put it out there and see what happens, but when end users start to get comfortable with it and see what's possible that they couldn't do before, now you say, oh, well, if it could do that, it might be able to do this. And that's where the monetization will come. So some of it will be organic, and as we always see, Doug, the vendors never get it right with everything. They don't say, here are the 10 use cases, go. Well, maybe one or two might stick, but it's the other 30 or 40 that they don't even think about that come. And that could be like, Chris he did the fireside chat with Jeff. He talked about Ozempic just as
Yeah.
a comparable, that the unintended consequences or use cases, right? What it was designed for, and they just discovered, oh, it's also good for weight loss. Oh, well, who knew? And now all of a sudden that's become the driver for that particular pharmaceutical. And that's exactly, as you say, that's what's going to happen once vCons kind of gets its feet, and then people will start to use it. Right now, there's no big companies behind it. There are a few people dabbling with it, but that's how it starts. And again, the idea that it's open and interoperable, that means that anybody could jump in, and once it starts working, the kind of what's the word I'm thinking about? Diffusion of this technology could happen very quickly, as we've seen with most AI applications. So this could be a hockey stick thing very quickly, but it can't happen until this kind of ecosystem starts to find its legs.
Yeah, he was calling it off-label, and it's interesting. I think in the history of medicine, lots of his discovery was, hey, this thing actually works better for this. But I was just thinking that actually the iPhone, interestingly enough, Jobs really wanted basically to have a phone that wouldn't use the mobile internet, that would just, you'd actually be able to look at the regular internet on your phone. But he invented all these other things like the App Store and all these other utilizations. I don't think it was on the radar that you would be using your phone to get on an airplane, for example.
Yeah, exactly. So that's okay, but again, think about this: that with this level of input from the legal community at this kind of nascent stage, and in fact, I think the last panel with the two lawyers, anyways, he talked about better to get us involved early when you kind of can lay the framework for what you're trying to do, than come to us when you're running scared a lawsuit has just hit you. And so if they're involved now, I think that raises the odds quite a bit that this will be kind of ready to scale quickly once the wheels start to move with this thing.
John, I don't want to give everyone a real big glimpse of what you might be writing about. When you get back home, what do you think you'll be saying to your readers and people that follow you?
Well, I think, again, the spotlight to me is on this compliance and consent idea, because we're in a world now where AI is for good and also not so good. And we don't have to look very far, even in the US and in Canada, where I am, to see indications that we're not that far off from living in a surveillance economy, right? Or society, I'm sorry, where everything is monitored and tracked. And so, you might say that's for public good, for safety, stopping crime, et cetera. But of course, think of all the data that's being captured and how our movements are being tracked. And hey, obviously in the wrong hands, that's not a good thing. And that's the thing with this, the pervasiveness of AI, and to say, okay, yes, that is one outcome you can have with it, but hey, if you do this in a smart and kind of measured way and have some regulatory framework behind it, the good use cases, I think, will be clearly defined. And that's what I would want to kind of articulate is, again, that balance, as we've talked about before, Doug, between innovation and regulation. Very tricky to strike it. And of course, that's the climate we're in right now. It's a very, pro free market environment here. And that's, you can't let AI be a total Wild West. There have to be some guardrails somewhere, whether it's policed inside by the vendors and the users or by the regulatory bodies. But these people are certainly thinking about that, and that's why I'm encouraged by what we see, right? In other words, this is not a Silicon Valley run train that's just going on the rails 100 miles an hour with nothing to stop it.
Well, John, I really want to thank you for joining me today. It's very interesting. I'm looking forward to reading some of those articles and some of your analysis of what's happening here, what happened, and looking forward to our next encounter as we continue to report on vCon. Where can we learn more about J. Arnold and Associates and your writing?
Sure. Well, thanks, Doug. Yes. Well, I'm out there, folks. I have a website, jarnoldassociates.com, and I'm regularly posting on LinkedIn. I posted quite a bit here from the event, and it won't be hard to do. And just before we sign off, Doug, a big thank you to Jeff for kind of keeping this going and putting this group in place, and on the side to his sister Lauren for kind of making this all happen. It's a small event, but it came off really well. And as always, the caliber of speakers and ideas here is really, really top notch. So glad I was able to come, and glad we could do this little segment here to share with everyone else.
John, thank you very much indeed.